Marcus Brooks stood motionless in the courtroom, his gaze locked onto the trembling detective on the witness stand. Slowly, he raised his hand, not to threaten and not to beg, but to show the entire room the wedding ring streaked with dried blood. "You shot my wife, right as she held our daughter in her arms." Gideon's voice was low but sharp, like a blade drawn without a sound. A choked breath escaped from the gallery. No one moved. "And now I'm going to show you what happens when you kill the wrong woman. The wife of the man who trained the most dangerous ghosts America has ever known." The city of Halverton welcomed him back with the dry heat of July and cautious stares from homes along the roadside. Marcus Brooks had been gone nearly 20 years. When he left, he was just a young black kid from Cedar Row, a neighborhood where the sound of police sirens echoed louder than the crickets at night. When he returned, he was a former special ops soldier, the man who had trained elite fighters in unnamed U.S. government operations. He was never famous, but in military circles, the name Shadow Shepherd was spoken with a mix of reverence and fear. He was the man who led soldiers into death and brought them back out. This time, he didn't come home carrying a weapon. He came with a worn canvas bag, a few books for the daughter he was about to meet for the first time, and a heart drained by war. All he wanted was an ordinary life, the kind he'd only dared to imagine while crouched under machine gun fire. Amara, his wife, was the only light he held on to. A sharp, strong-willed community doctor who turned down offers from private hospitals to open a clinic for the homeless and teenagers beaten by the police. The day he returned, she stepped off the porch, holding baby Naya, the 6-month-old daughter Marcus had never held. She wore the yellow dress he had mailed from Afghanistan, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were full of tears, but they didn't tremble. "You're really home?" He didn't answer. He just wrapped them both in his arms, and in that moment, he believed he had finally escaped the darkness. The first 3 weeks were peaceful. Marcus fixed the fence, helped kids in the neighborhood with their bikes. He learned to change diapers, fumbled around the kitchen, and let his daughter fall asleep with her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. Some nights, he jolted awake at the sound of helicopters, and Amara would place her hand on his chest, grounding him back to the present. But peace in Halverton was as fragile as a summer lake, always hiding whirlpools underneath. Marcus began noticing the unusual presence of police around the neighborhood. Patrol cars lingered longer in front of the house. One afternoon, as he pushed Naya's stroller through the park, an officer pointed at him through a rolled-down window and said something he couldn't quite hear, but understood wasn't a greeting. "I'm used to it," Amara said after he told her. "Around here, our skin is enough to make them suspicious of everything." And then, she began to tell him what had been happening. That in the past year, Halverton police had used federal funds to purchase heavy-duty weapons. That incidents labeled non-compliance during arrest had tripled, and most of the victims were black. That Amara herself, in her role as a doctor, had treated at least 9 patients with broken bones, cases officially documented as falling downstairs. "I reported it," she said, "but they did nothing. Said there wasn't enough evidence. No video, no cameras." "They have you," Marcus said. She gave a tired smile. A black woman telling the truth is still just a voice in the wind. She started attending city council meetings every week, presented numbers, presented photos, even brought maps of neighborhoods labeled for enhanced attention. Then one evening, she came home with heaviness in her eyes. "You know the police chief's son?" she asked. "James Whitaker. Heard of him? He came to the clinic today, not as a patient, just stood there watching me like he was measuring the distance between me and a trigger." Marcus wanted to act immediately, but Amara stopped him. "We can't fight them with violence," she said. "That's their language, not ours." Marcus didn't know that just 2 weeks later, Amara wouldn't have the chance to speak again, and the only language left would be his. They only had 6 weeks together. After 20 years in the places the government called undisclosed zones, Marcus Brooks finally set foot back on American soil, stepping through the gate of his old home in sun-baked, dusty Cedar Row. He'd been granted a special leave before completing his discharge paperwork. 6 weeks, to be a father, a husband, to hold his daughter for the first time. The baby he'd only seen through blurry video calls from halfway around the world. He believed it would be enough. The day he packed to return to the military base in Arizona to finalize his retirement, Amara saw him off with a quiet smile. There was no long embrace, no tears. Both of them had lived long enough to know every goodbye carries the shadow of a last farewell. But no one thought this time it would be real. "We'll be fine," Amara said, adjusting his collar. "Don't worry." Marcus didn't answer. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, then bent lower and whispered something to Naya, who slept soundly in her mother's arms, and walked away. His flight to Arizona was delayed by more than 2 hours. By the time Marcus arrived at the base, night had fallen. He pulled out his phone, about to send the usual message, "Made it." But before he could hit send, another call lit up the screen. A neighbor. "Marcus?" The voice on the other end cracked with grief. "Something happened. The police, they broke into your house. Amara, she was shot." Each word hit him like armor-piercing rounds. He couldn't believe it, refused to. He thought it was a mistake. He called back. First the hospital, then the police, then the sitter next door. But no one gave him a straight answer, only the same repeated phrases. "We're investigating. We're sorry. Please stay calm." He caught the first emergency flight back to Halverton. It took less than 10 hours, but for Marcus, it stretched longer than all his years in Afghanistan. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't speak. He just sat, motionless, fists clenched so tight they bled. When he reached the hospital, they wouldn't let him see her. Her body had already been transferred to the morgue. A nurse, eyes swollen red, met his gaze. "She died on the scene," she whispered. "3 bullets, just outside your daughter's room." Marcus didn't ask anything else. He already knew. The way people avoided his eyes, the way they quickly swept papers off desks when he entered, it all told him what no one would say out loud. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate operation. This was a killing under the mask of law. And he hadn't been there to stop it. The police stated they had received a report of an armed suspect in a residential neighborhood, and Marcus's address had been flagged as high risk. They executed a rapid breach, no warning, no sirens. And somehow, every officer's body camera had a technical malfunction at the same time. No one answered why a black woman holding her 6-month-old was shot 3 times without a single warning. No one explained why there was no warrant. No one explained why the weapon-like object in her hands was a baby bottle. The press release read, "Officers followed protocol. Suspect failed to comply and posed a threat to safety. Signed, James Whitaker, Tactical Unit Commander." Marcus read that line 14 times, then tore the paper into 100 pieces. That night, he returned to his house. There was no blood left on the floor. The forensic team had already cleaned for contamination control. But the smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. He stood in the living room, where Amara used to nurse their baby each night, and felt a hollowness that went beyond grief. Not just because she was gone, but because he, a man who had survived firefights, raids, ambushes, and extraction missions, hadn't been there to stop it. Right inside his own home. And the bitterest truth of all? The people who killed his wife weren't enemies in another land. They were men who wore the same badges that read, "To protect and serve." And they stood before the press and said, "We're very sorry." That night, in the empty bedroom, Marcus turned on the desk lamp. There on the table was a small envelope, no name, no return address, slipped under his door while he'd been away. Inside, a USB drive and a handwritten note. "If you want to know who's really behind Amara's death, listen to this recording, but listen alone. Signed, Alvarez." Marcus stared at the small scrap of paper. The handwriting was rough, rushed, but steady. "Listen alone." 3 words, a warning, or a dying wish. He plugged the USB into his old laptop and sat down. The screen showed a single audio file, no name, no details. He hit play. A voice came through, hoarse, exhausted, like a man who hadn't slept in days. "If you're hearing this, I probably won't get the chance to tell you in person." A pause. "My name is Noel Alvarez. I was, maybe still am, a detective with the Halverton Police Department. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope I can stop what's coming next." That voice, Marcus now realized, was the same officer who had stood silently in the back during the scene investigation the day Amara was murdered. He remembered the man's eyes, lowered, filled with something he mistook for cowardice. Now he knew. It was guilt. In the 18-minute recording, Alvarez confessed everything. The police chief and his son, James Whitaker, had created a list, community control targets. Black citizens with influence, especially those who publicly criticized law enforcement. Amara was on that list, not because she was a threat, but because she had proof. And she was gathering more. And because with the respect she carried in her community, she was more dangerous than any gun. Alvarez admitted he'd known, heard, stayed silent. She gave me 3 medical files, he said in the recording. Young black men, all showed signs of assault by the same rapid response team. She didn't ask me to speak out, just not to look away, but I looked away. He spoke about internal meetings, where the chief hinted that a random sweep might help cool things down, where James Whitaker always volunteered for the dirty work, where body cams could accidentally turn off due to technical issues. Marcus, Alvarez said, his voice thick with emotion, I know who you are. So do they, but they're not afraid. They think you'll stay quiet like everyone else, or lash out, so they can take out what's left of your family. After a long breath, he continued, I left you copies of everything I have, files, audio, internal memos. I hid them inside the Bible on my altar table. If something happens to me, my daughter knows what to do. Marcus stopped the recording. He lowered his head onto the desk. For the first time since Amara's death, he cried. Not from pain, but for something nearly extinct in this world. Late courage, but real. The next day, it rained. Around noon, a gentle knock came at the door. Marcus opened it, and standing there was a little girl, maybe 8, tight curls, dark brown eyes that mirrored the man in the recording. Daddy said, if something happened, I should give this to you. From her coat pocket, she pulled out an old, worn Bible. Pressed into its spine with brown tape was a small USB drive. Marcus knelt and accepted the book with both hands, as if it held the final piece of the man's soul. He didn't ask questions, just placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and nodded. You're very brave. That afternoon, local news reported, Detective Noel Alvarez died in a single-vehicle crash. The car lost control, hit a utility pole, no surveillance footage, no witnesses, case closed in 18 hours. Marcus read the article over and over, each time feeling fire surge through his chest. The police had shot his wife. Now they silenced the only man in their ranks who dared to speak the truth. What they didn't realize was that in doing so, they gave Marcus something far more dangerous than any weapon: evidence, and a reason to fight. Marcus was no longer a retired soldier, no longer a new father, fumbling with breakfast and baby bottles. He had become exactly what America once sent into enemy territory: the man who trained the most dangerous operatives to do what no one else would. And this time, the darkness he was walking into wasn't in the desert. It was right here, in the heart of the city, behind a badge, beneath a uniform, protected by those who always said, we followed protocol. After Alvarez's death, Marcus didn't move right away. He didn't storm out like a man blinded by vengeance. He didn't call the press. He didn't stand outside police headquarters yelling into a megaphone. He withdrew into the shadows, the place he knew best, and began to investigate. He went through everything on the USB Alvarez had left him. Some of it made him so angry he could barely breathe. Some of it made his hands tremble, not from fear, but from revulsion. But there was one folder that stood out. Amara had named it HAL Res 15. It was separate from the medical files, a private directory she created to track something she had long suspected, but hadn't been able to confirm: a link between the police force and local real estate developers. The folder contained residential zoning maps, urban restructuring plans for Cedar Row, a neighborhood largely made up of black residents and immigrants. And the most chilling part? These plans had already been signed off before any so-called civil unrest had even occurred. Worse still, a string of emails between city officials and a developer named Clearview Development revealed quiet negotiations, helping to clear out problematic elements in exchange for priority access to the redeveloped lots. Marcus felt a chill creep down his spine. The problematic elements those emails referred to were people like Amara. She wasn't the unfortunate victim of a mistaken raid. She was a threat to a much larger plan, a coordinated effort to erase an entire community to make room for high-rises, luxury shops, and gated neighborhoods for upper-class white families. Marcus began visiting Amara's old workplace, the Halverton East Community Clinic. It was now shut down, with signs citing lack of funding and safety concerns. He reached out to Dr. Linda Park, Amara's close colleague, someone who had witnessed her fight for patients countless times. Linda met with him after work in a small cafe downtown. When he asked about Amara, her eyes welled up. She knew she was playing with fire, but I've never seen anyone stand their ground like she did. Marcus showed her the printed emails from Clearview. Linda nodded, lowering her voice. I overheard the chief physician saying we were told to avoid taking cases connected to police force incidents. Said it came from above. One time, Amara argued right in the middle of a staff meeting. After that, I noticed she was being watched. Watched? Marcus tightened his grip on his coffee cup. Linda nodded. Unmarked black cars parked outside the clinic, strangers asking about her schedule, medical records mysteriously erased or printed with errors. The office printer got hacked. Amara never said anything directly, but we all knew she was being isolated. Marcus felt his chest clench. Everything, the silence from supervisors, Alvarez's sudden death, was now connecting. This wasn't a string of random failures. It was a system, coordinated, silent, intentional. James Whitaker wasn't just a cop. He was the hired blade of a much larger agenda, gentrification disguised as law enforcement. Marcus began digging into public data, sources most civilians overlooked, but that he, with his military background, could read like a tactical map. He found contract records between the city and Clearview over the past 2 years. All of them were centered in neighborhoods with the highest black and immigrant populations. He also found the name of a key intermediary, Elijah Crane, a former attorney, now acting as Clearview's legal representative, and the brother-in-law of Police Chief Richard Whitaker. Now Marcus knew, the rot didn't stop at the police department. It ran deep through City Hall, the zoning office, even public health systems. And the most brutal realization? Amara's death wasn't a tragedy. It was the inevitable outcome of a string of calculated decisions made by people who had never known what it meant to live in fear. Back at home, Marcus sat in the room that still echoed with memories of his wife. He opened Amara's old desk drawer, found her handwritten notes, lists of patients she had treated, X-ray prints showing injuries that didn't match official statements. Sticky notes like, boy says he was kicked while handcuffed, possible rib fracture. He gathered everything, the emails, the zoning plans, neighborhood camera footage, Alvarez's recordings, and slowly the picture came together. Violence, land grabbing, investment, silencing dissent, all working like a machine, funded by taxpayer dollars. Marcus closed the file. Now he knew, his fight wasn't just to avenge Amara, it was to drag the truth into the light, to expose that this so-called security raid was nothing more than a contract hit wrapped in a badge, where cops wore armor, fired bullets, and killed civilians, to clear the way for real estate. Marcus knew he couldn't do this alone. The evidence Amara and Alvarez left behind was growing like fire smoldering beneath ashes. But to turn it into action, he needed a team. Not journalists, not lawyers, but people who operated like a tactical unit, silent, precise, and untraceable. And he knew exactly where to start. Lucas Rayner, a former marksman in the recon squad Marcus once led in Kandahar. He wasn't the sharpest shooter, but he was the most loyal, at least, back then. Marcus had once dragged Lucas out of a hopeless ambush, and in their world, being saved meant you owed a lifetime debt. Marcus believed Lucas hadn't forgotten that to Kreaths. Their first meeting after 8 years wasn't easy. Lucas, he still. When Marcus showed up at his door, Lucas didn't speak. He just stared for a long moment, then opened the door and poured 2. Heard about Amara, he said. Marcus nodded. I'm not here to reminisce. I'm here because you know how to help me expose them. Lucas leaned back in his chair. Yeah, I figured. You wouldn't show up unless it was serious. I've been following the news out of Halverton. But are you sure about this? You're not in the war zone anymore, Marcus. Here, they don't shoot you with bullets. They use laws, public opinion, things you can't even see coming. They killed my wife, in my house, in front of my child, Marcus said, voice steady and low. I know exactly what battlefield I'm in. Lucas nodded. That soldier's nod. And in the following week, Marcus started assembling a small tactical cell. Lucas handled surveillance and on-ground access. A hacker named Mina, who had worked with Marcus during an African operation, handled data infiltration. And Marcus was at the center. Strategy, movement, coordination. Everything started to click. They successfully infiltrated a city hall server, extracting internal emails from the financial department, emails showing special reimbursement transfers directed to the Halverton Police Department. The origin of the funds? A shell account tied to Clearview Development. Marcus could feel it. His investigation was getting dangerously close to the core. But then, things started going wrong. An anonymous IP Mina accessed triggered a trace alert. A security camera in the evidence storage lot accidentally redirected just as Lucas passed by. A meeting with a key witness got blown. She backed out at the last minute and called the police. Mina was the first to speak up. "We're being watched. Not from the outside. From within. Someone's feeding them our moves." Before Marcus could reply, she added, "And there's only one person who knows our full plan, our safe houses, our timelines." She looked at him. Lucas. Marcus didn't want to believe it. But he was a soldier. And a good soldier puts reason before emotion. He reviewed the leaks, cross-referenced the compromised data. Everything matched. Everything Lucas had access to was what had been exposed. Then Mina traced a bounce packet back to an internal Halverton PD address. The sender had used a fake VPN, but not well enough. The device that sent the file had previously connected to Lucas's watch via Bluetooth. Marcus called for a private meeting in an abandoned parking lot. No weapons. No team. Just two men who had once survived the same war, now standing in the middle of a very different battlefield. "You got anything to tell me?" Marcus asked. Lucas didn't deny it, didn't act shocked. He just looked at Marcus, like a man who had already lost the part of himself worth saving. "They threatened my kid," Lucas finally said. "I've had a suspended record since last year, some assault case. They found it, said they'd press charges, lock me up, put my boy in foster care." He paused. "I thought they just wanted to monitor you. I didn't think they'd actually—" "They killed my wife," Marcus said. His voice didn't rise, but it hit like a cinder block. "And they almost killed my daughter, and you gave them the way in." Lucas stepped back, panic flashing in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I can't undo it. But if I help you now, There's no if anymore," Marcus cut him off. "This isn't the battlefield, Lucas. Out here, betrayal gets people killed. For real." A soft sound came from behind. Mina stepped out from the shadows. She was holding up her phone. She had live-streamed the entire conversation. Lucas froze. Truth wasn't a rumor anymore. It was evidence. "You gonna kill me?" he asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "No, but I'm gonna let the world see what you really killed. Trust, honor, and your last chance to do the right thing." He turned and walked away, saying nothing more. And Lucas, who had survived wars, raids, and hell itself, now stood alone, without a bunker to hide in, and no one left to call him a brother. The live stream between Marcus and Lucas spread faster than a summer wildfire. Within 3 hours, the video hit over 500,000 views across social platforms. It was shared with hashtags, "Justice for Amara," "Police killed her," "The system must answer." Though no names were formally dropped, the revelations were too clear to ignore. A former soldier had just exposed betrayal, corruption, and the orchestrated killing behind what the police had called standard procedure. Marcus wasn't hiding anymore. He didn't have to. 3 months after his wife's death, he had built a wall of evidence, not just Alvarez's files, Amara's investigation folder, or the leaked audio from internal meetings, but new voices, rising from the silence. A black mother stood at a city council meeting, holding up her son's file, arrested for running a red light, hospitalized with 3 broken teeth. A local pastor canceled his church's anniversary to host a town hall on police violence. A student group published a study. Halverton had the second highest rate of no-warrant raids in the state, 93% targeting people of color. But it was Marcus's next move that changed the tide. He didn't just release raw data. He turned it into a formal, organized case file, structured like a legal indictment. 1. Motive: emails revealing real estate gentrification agendas. 2. Method: illegitimate raids, systemic abuse in law enforcement and healthcare. 3. Protection: city officials, the police chief's brother-in-law, Clearview Development. 4. Result: a black woman shot while holding her child. An honest officer eliminated. A kill squad dressed like public servants. Marcus compressed it all into one PDF. The title, The Amara File, The Truth Behind a Killing and the System That Enabled It. He sent it to national media outlets. No threats. No fundraising campaigns. No paywalls. Just one line in the email. We don't need revenge. We need justice. The day CNN aired its first report, Marcus sat by the window, baby Naya asleep in his arms. He didn't cry. But when the anchor mentioned his wife, not as the victim of a police shooting, but as the brave woman who documented systemic violence, he gripped his daughter gently. She opened her eyes, looked at him, confused. He smiled, whispered, "Your mom did it." More headlines followed. Journalist Sarah Keating, who had been quietly following the case, published a 5,000-word exposé. When Justice Sleeps, Amara Brooks and the Indictment of a Town. It was shared millions of times, translated into multiple languages, and it pulled Halverton, a forgotten name on a map, into the center of national conversation. Then the awakening took shape. Crowds gathered outside City Hall, holding signs that read, "Justice for Amara," and for all the others. They weren't just demanding justice for one woman. They were demanding transparency for everyone who'd ever been silenced by a system designed to suppress them. The city council called an emergency hearing. For the first time in 15 years, the names Richard Whittaker and James Whittaker were added to the official list of those under investigation. As the room erupted in applause, Marcus stood quietly at the back. No chants. No fists raised, just eyes, fixed on the same men who once labeled him a threat, now struggling to meet his gaze. Truth begins with one person enduring it, but justice takes a crowd rising together. That day, Marcus returned to Amara's old clinic. The building had long been closed, but the faded sign, Brooks Community Health, still clung to the roof. He carried a new sign, hand-painted in bold black letters, Witness Protection Center, in memory of Amara Brooks. It was a beginning, not the end of pain, but the start of something Amara always believed in, that the system could change if enough people had the courage to face it. When James Whittaker's name was officially added to the investigation list, Marcus thought he could finally step back. He had done his part, released the evidence, sparked a wave of public reckoning, forced the system to look itself in the mirror. But then 1 week passed, then 2. No arrest warrant. No follow-up news coverage. James Whittaker, the man who led the raid that killed Amara, never testified, never appeared. Police Chief Richard Whittaker claimed health issues and took a leave of absence. James vanished like he had never existed. Marcus called the state investigation office. All he got was hold music and a scripted promise. Your request is being processed. Familiar. Mechanical. He understood immediately. If they dragged this out another week, another month, James would resurface on the news as a wrongfully accused officer. Or worse, a mayoral candidate. Marcus knew this had to end. Not with journalists, not with hashtags, but with his own hands. Through crypto transaction logs Mina traced, Marcus located a secluded estate on the northern edge of Halverton, technically owned by a shell company linked to Clearview Development. It wasn't under security watch, no public transit nearby, but Lucas had once tracked 3 unregistered SUVs to this place. Marcus didn't call the police, didn't alert the press, didn't ask for a warrant. He went alone. The afternoon was overcast. The air was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Marcus stepped out of the car, no weapon in hand, but mind sharp, like he was back leading his team into a war zone overseas. The estate stood quiet among barren trees. No dogs, no guards, not a sound. The back door was unlocked. He entered like a shadow. The ground floor was pristine, furniture clean, polished, like someone had scrubbed it for trace removal. But from the basement, he saw a faint green light and the soft hum of cooling fans. Marcus descended. There, in a room full of surveillance monitors, private camera feeds, and encrypted laptops, James Whittaker sat. Thinner now, eyes sunken. But his voice still carried that smug arrogance. "You got here faster than I expected," James said, not even rising. "I thought you'd let the justice system finish the job." Marcus stepped closer, gaze locked on him. "Whose justice?" Marcus asked. "The system you and your father built to press against the necks of people like us." James stood slowly, squinting. "You don't get it, Marcus. I didn't do it because I hated your wife. I did it because the system needs order. She was a threat. Not because she had a gun, but because she had a voice. And you silenced that voice with 3 bullets to the chest?" Marcus growled, jaw clenched. James sneered. I did what I was trained to do. Quick response, situational control, neutralize the threat. And if I had to do it again, he shrugged, I would. Marcus reached into his pocket and held up a small USB drive. Good. Say that again. James froze. What the hell? He lunged forward to snatch it. But Marcus was faster. With a precise takedown, he slammed James face first to the cold concrete floor, zip-tied his wrists behind his back. He didn't need to hit him. He didn't need to yell. I've been recording since I walked in, Marcus said, tightening the restraints. You just confessed to the only living witness left. James thrashed, snarled. No one's going to believe you. I'll get my lawyer. I've got people behind me, congressmen. You could have the White House, Marcus cut in. But today, I have something you'll never buy. The truth. He dragged James up the stairs, tossed him across the polished floor like a sack of corruption, took out his phone, recorded James's face, exposed, disarmed, devoid of power, then sent the video to the press, local news, and the state investigation office. And one final call. Sarah Keating, this is Marcus. He confessed. I recorded it. I'm holding him here until the state police arrive. James Whitaker was arrested that very night. No more escapes. The USB recording, the video Marcus took, and the data pulled from James's hidden servers in the basement, all of it crushed his defense. A full-scale investigation launched within 24 hours. Names started to fall like dominoes. Police Chief Richard Whitaker, the Deputy City Attorney, senior staff from Clearview Development. At the first press conference, Marcus didn't say much. He stood beside the podium, holding his daughter in his arms, eyes locked on the cameras. A baby bottle was mistaken for a weapon, he said, voice steady. But a system designed to kill people, that was called procedure. I didn't do this just for my wife. I did this because no child should grow up not knowing who killed their mother. The crowd below stood and applauded, not for victory, but because something had been restored inside them, the belief that justice, though delayed, can still arrive. The first dawn after the legal storm settled over Halverton in a hush of fog and quiet. Not the kind of silence born from fear, but from something new beginning to take root. Peace, after truth has been set free. The people had seen it with their own eyes. James Whitaker, once hailed as a symbol of security, led away in handcuffs from the very mansion where he had been hiding, by the hands of the husband of the woman he killed. No more evasive statements. No more cover-ups, no more systems shielding murderers. It was time to begin again. 1 month after the preliminary trial, Marcus officially launched the Amara Brooks Memorial Foundation, headquartered in the very building that once housed the Westbrook Police Department, the agency that issued the unlawful raid that took Amara's life. At the new bronze sign installed by the entrance, an inscription read, "We are not here to fight the police. We are here to stop the bullets from hitting the wrong people, at the wrong time, forever." The foundation operates under 3 core pillars. 1. Free legal aid for victims of law enforcement violence. 2. A community-run independent surveillance network, elected and overseen by local citizens. 3. Public education on civil rights and emergency response, so everyone knows they have the right to say no when the law is being misused. The building preserves 2 of the original holding cells, a stark reminder that the place where the innocent were once locked away is now a place built to protect them. But Halverton wasn't the only one listening. The impact of the case spread across the state. Under pressure from both the public and the media, the state governor signed a 3-part police reform package, informally dubbed the Amara Act. Bans nighttime raids unless a court-approved emergency warrant is issued with specific evidence. Mandatory body cam activation during all operations. Turning it off renders the footage legally inadmissible. County-level independent oversight committees, elected by the public, with authority to access records, conduct internal investigations, and temporarily suspend offending officers. Change didn't come from conflict. It came from truth too loud to ignore. At the community clinic where Amara once worked, a new door was opened. Amara's Light, Psychological Recovery Room. A place for victims of violence and their families, where no one has to explain their pain or prove they deserve healing. On the main wall hangs a portrait of Amara, gentle smile, eyes full of light, beneath a quote from her journal. "Never grow used to injustice, even when the world around you falls silent." law students, medical students, social workers. They began studying the story of Amara, Marcus, and Naya as a case study in ethics and public policy. Amara wasn't alive to see it, but every change carried her name. Naya, now 3 years old, remembers nothing of that night. All she knows is that her mother was someone who did the right thing, even when it was hard. Every night before bed, Marcus tells her a different version of the same story. The day your mom made a whole city stop and listen. Marcus no longer lived in the shadows. He appeared at forums and community gatherings, but never accepted the label hero. He turned down political nominations. "I'm not a symbol," he said. "I'm just a man who lost his wife to a broken system. And I don't want anyone else to pay that price." Halverton wasn't the same, but it didn't repeat its past. The city council, now made up of Black, immigrant, and younger voices, held regular meetings with residents. New police recruits were required to pass empathy training, including simulations of arbitrary stops, so they would understand what it feels like on the other side of the badge. No one called Halverton a model city, but everyone agreed. It was where justice learned to listen. Amara had believed the system could change, if enough people were brave enough to confront it. She was right. She didn't live to see that day, but her death was the spark that awakened a community. On that day, atop the quiet hill of Halverton, Marcus and Naya laid a bouquet of white flowers on Amara's grave. The headstone bore no titles, no date of death. Just one line, "She spoke," and the silence broke.